This is a new whistleblower report filed with the Department of Homeland Security with some very serious allegations about mistreatment at an immigration detention center in Georgia. Many of you have asked me about this story this week, so I wanted to give you an update. Plus, I want to update you about what's going on with the COVID-19 vaccines because we've talked so much about that. And these two stories are actually linked because of the pandemic, which I'll explain in a moment. But let's talk about this whistleblower complaint. The fact that it's a whistleblower complaint actually means something to me as a journalist, which I'll talk to you about in just a moment. But who filed this complaint? It was a nurse who worked at this immigration detention center, along with the detainees themselves, who are represented by a collection of advocacy groups. What are the allegations in this complaint? They are wide-reaching. Everything from unsanitary conditions to spoiled food to, this is the big headline that we've heard a lot about this week, hysterectomies performed on immigrant women in ICE custody. So the first thing you should know is that the complaint is very wide-ranging. Most of the complaint actually focuses on whether or not the detention center is taking proper precautions to protect the detainees as well as the workers in the pandemic environment that we're in. But of course, the major headline coming from the complaint has to do with allegations about these hysterectomies, which is obviously quite shocking. What is important to know about this whistleblower complaint is that it is a formal complaint filed with the federal government. Federal agencies have inspector generals. These are departments that are on purpose placed to watch to make sure that the federal government is operating correctly. And so if you work for an agency or you're a contractor, you can file a whistleblower complaint, which means that you can raise your hand and say, I think something wrong is happening here. And you would have some protection if you did it formally in this way. So that's much different than, let's say, taking your story to the New York Times. So that's notable to me. This gives this report some gravity, some seriousness. The allegations are wide-ranging. They're very specific. They're well reported out. It is in a formal complaint. That formal complaint now with the Department of Homeland Security is something that the Inspector General will look at. Now you have Democrat lawmakers on Capitol Hill asking for an investigation as well. So it puts this story in a little bit of a different realm than just an otherwise media report. That said, we have to proceed cautiously. We don't know if any of these allegations are true. We only have this one whistleblower complaint, and we do have the perspective of the nurse, but we don't have a lot of other voices yet. One top medical official from ICE came out, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and said they have no record of hysterectomies, mass hysterectomies happening at this detention center, and that no medical procedures would happen without any sort of agreement from someone that was held at the facility. The folks that are held at the facility, by the way, are within custody of the federal government. The facility itself is actually run by a private company that runs other facilities. So it's another reason to sort of also pay attention. Well, is what's happening here, if true, is it happening elsewhere? So a lot of questions about this report. Big headline, of course, regarding the hysterectomies. If you look at the more than 20-page report, which I will put on the website for you, you should note that most of the report is actually focusing on the COVID-19 related questions about whether or not safety is being followed. So just a couple things to know there on that. And that's why I was saying when we're looking at COVID-19 vaccines, it's like the pandemic sort of links these stories together. It seems that everything is sort of linked with the pandemic. Some of you might hear, okay, Democratic lawmakers, this whistleblower report, why are we getting this report out now? And it's an unfortunate reality that we're in, that almost any news story that emerges, whether from Republicans or Democrats in the environment that we're in at this point ahead of the election, is going to raise questions about, well, why is this being brought up now? Is it meant to damage the Department of Homeland Security, the Trump administration? These are questions we can ask. We can always ask political questions. We know that there was a whistleblower complaint last week within the Department of Homeland Security as well, with allegations about whether or not the whistleblower was saying that he was asked to change intelligence specifically for the Trump administration. So as these stories come up, we're gonna have to ask the question about politics involved. Right now, I think it's just important for you to know the basics of what's going on. If you have any questions or comments about this particular area, please let us know. We'll continue to watch the story to see what happens next. In the meantime, I want to just tell you a little bit about COVID-19 vaccines, because we talked about what happened with the Oxford vaccine trial being stopped last week because someone fell ill. You should know that the vaccine trial can restart. It's restarted. That was clear to do so by this committee that looked into this particular individual. We still don't know what happened with that one participant, but this is why we do trials and why the trials get bigger, to see if there are any rare side effects that can happen. But the trial is continuing. Pfizer announced that they're expanding their trial. This is a separate vaccine. One of the things that they're trying to expand into is to test actually slightly younger people. So they wanted to test, 16-year-olds rather than just 18-year-olds and older. This is one of the things that the CEO talked about. And now we have news from the US government that they're trying to already put together logistics with the CDC, the Health and Human Services Department, the Department of Defense, about how to distribute vaccines when they are able to, working with the states in order to do that. There's been a big question about who should distribute the vaccines and how it should be done. But we're getting a first glimpse of how the federal government is trying to put together a plan, even without knowing what vaccines they have. And by the way, that's really important because different vaccines will have to be stored differently. And so there's a whole bunch of logistics that will have to be put together. Something you should note is that the government is saying that they want the first vaccine to be free to citizens. But just remember, when you hear free from the federal government, that the federal government actually uses your taxpayer money. I know sometimes it's easy to forget that it's actually your money that they're using. So that's part of the early plan and early reports of the plan. Completely separately, one of the a huge vaccine producer, the largest in the world out of India, the CEO came forward and was talking a little bit about vaccine production. And he said, listen, if every person on the planet needs 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccines, he said, we're going to need 15 billion doses. And he was saying logistically, there's no way for that to happen anytime soon. Really, it would be until 2024 till he could see wide-ranging vaccinations, if indeed we get to that point, which is a big if. All right, just a couple updates for you midweek. Hope you're having a great day. Questions or comments about any of these stories, let me know. And as always, more on smarternews.com. I'll put the Whistleblower Report news on the vaccines there for you today so you can peruse it if you desire. All right, guys, have a great day. I'll talk to you later.